Welcome, friend, to Life and Liberty Radio. I'm David Householder, here to encourage your pursuit of happiness. You and I are partners, exploring our shared spiritual journeys. Together, we're dreaming and working for a free society. Tell others today about our adventure in faith and freedom. So breathe in, open your mind, lift up your spirit. Let's get started. This is podcast number 3, on the President's State of the Union address. And I want to just say right up front, I have nothing against the President. I don't believe in conspiracy theories. I don't think he's a Muslim. I think he was born in Hawaii. I'm not a weirdo, okay? I'm not a wingnut. I just believe that economically speaking, the President is wrong about almost everything. He believes that central planning from Washington, D.C. is the way to fix our problems. And he just doesn't even consider the alternative that a free society left to itself would do a much, much, much better job. And it's just economically false to believe that central planning leads to prosperity. If you believe that, you'd rather live in North Korea, the central planning Valhalla, as opposed to Hong Kong, which has no planning whatsoever. So we're going to pick up where we left off. And the President says we need to keep our promises. And here's how he says it. Our government shouldn't make promises we cannot keep, but we must keep the promises we've already made. Now, first of all, there's a contradiction there. Our government shouldn't make promises we cannot keep. Well, they have. But we must keep the promises we've already made, even if they're promises that we shouldn't have made. So there's this just internal contradiction there. And the truth is, there are times that we make promises that we shouldn't keep. And we can't keep. We've all grown up in families where promises were made and they were not able to be kept. I remember when I was in high school, it was winter in Minnesota, and we got a shiny brochure about a family vacation in the Bahamas. And this just looked so nice. There's that clear blue water, and we thought this would be amazing. And my parents just sort of offhandedly said, let's do that. Well, once we counted the cost and figured out the time involved and what we'd have to miss to go, we realized it wasn't going to work. And Mom and Dad had to say, we're not going to the Bahamas this year. And that was the right decision to make. They shouldn't have said, well, we made this promise, so we have to go. Well, the truth is the government has promised Medicare and also has promised Social Security to people, and there is no way we would be able to keep those promises. It simply is not possible. Next thing he talks about is the idea of tax loopholes. And here he goes. To hit the rest of our deficit reduction target, we should do what leaders in both parties have already suggested and save hundreds of billions of dollars by getting rid of tax loopholes and deductions for the well-off and well-connected. After all, why would we choose to make deeper cuts to education and Medicare just to protect special interest tax breaks? How is that fair? How does that promote growth? Well, it does promote growth because the more the wealthy people are free to invest and to hire, that promotes growth. He just really doesn't understand that. I have never been hired by a middle-class person. Sure, that person might have been the HR person who hired me, but the money itself came from wealthy people. Wealthy people. That's how hiring works. Middle-class people, upper middle-class people, might hire people to cut their grass and clean their homes, but they don't hire a staff. Wealthy people start companies and hire people. Almost all of our hiring comes from wealthy people. The Steve Jobs of the world and the Henry Fords of the world hire people. That promotes growth. The president believes that the federal government and the bureaucracy will do a better job with that money than the wealthy people. That's just stupid. It makes no sense. And also there's a government euphemism, which almost everybody buys. and that's we need to get rid of tax loopholes. Well, getting rid of tax loopholes is Washington, D.C. speak for let's raise taxes. The truth is, you probably benefit from loopholes, and you would guard them with your life. For instance, the mortgage interest deduction or the childhood deduction. Those are called loopholes. Do you want them closed? I think not. So here we have a situation where we have a president who simply doesn't understand where growth comes from wealthy people, and simply doesn't understand that nobody believes the government will do a better job with that money than the wealthy. And also, he says, why would you choose to make deeper cuts to education and Medicare? Well, we have to take way deeper cuts to Medicare because we can't give Medicare to millionaires. We just can't. Do we give Medicare to grandma in a trailer in Florida? Absolutely. Absolutely. But millionaires? No. We've got millions of retiree millionaires, and they're receiving free medical care, and they can afford to pay for it themselves. This simply can't go on. Deeper cuts to education? Help me understand why the federal government has to be involved in education at all. That's a state issue or a local issue, and in my mind, kind of radical, it's a private issue. Closing loopholes is a tax hike. Then he goes on. Now it's our best chance for bipartisan comprehensive tax reform that encourages job creation and helps bring down the deficit. The American people deserve a tax code that helps small businesses. Now he says we need some loopholes for small businesses. Helps them spend less time filling out complicated forms. Oh, yes, I trust the government to do that. The same government that came out with the U.S. Code, the most comprehensive regulation ever on the face of the earth. Soviet Russia, at the height of its totalitarianism, never had a fraction of the regulations that we do. Look up U.S. Code. You will be shocked to see the level to which it goes. I mentioned earlier that there is actually 79 pages of regulation on kitchen fans and how they have to be made. So this is going to help small businesses. Small businesses, hey, I own one. I run one, actually two of them. And about a third of the time, about a third of the personnel hours that go into my businesses are doing nothing but keeping up with government forms. You call that productivity? You call that growth? Talk to any small business owner and ask, do you believe Washington, D.C. is your friend? You will get belly laughs, absolute belly laughs. And then he goes on. And more time expanding and hiring. This is small businesses. A tax code that ensures billionaires with high-powered accountants can't pay a lower rate than their hardworking secretaries. A tax code that lowers incentives to move jobs overseas. Why do people move jobs overseas? Because of the regulation over here. Business thrives in a free environment. You thrive in a free environment where there's total freedom to do what you need to do. That's when you can bring out your gifts. That's when business works. Businesses go to places with less regulations. That's simply the truth. It's the way it goes. He goes on to talk about wise investments. So let's set party interests aside. Okay, well, that sounds good. Anytime he gives you like a feel-good phrase, it means something else is coming up. So let's set party interests aside and work to pass a budget that replaces reckless cuts. Reckless cuts. Oh, there hasn't been a single cut yet. The only thing they're cutting is the rate of growth. Think about that. Oh, we're going to increase it by 19%, not 20%. And they call that reckless cuts. Reckless cuts. In other words, we're being way too frugal, even though we're spending $25 for every $15 we take in. And we've been doing it since the beginning of the Bush years. Reckless cuts. Help me with that. Reckless cuts. Replaces reckless cuts with smart savings. Smart savings. Everyone's for smart savings. I've never seen the government ever saving. too in debt to save. If you're in debt, can you save? I think not. And wise investments in our future. Wise investments is Washington, D.C. euphemistic speak for more spending in government. Another code word besides wise investments is infrastructure. That means more spending, more government, more bureaucracy, more buildings with people getting federal paychecks. Have you read The Blackberry Bush? At the moment the Berlin Wall falls, a boy and a girl are born on opposite sides of the world. Did they share a destiny? Do we all share the same destiny? Come on a treasure hunt through the landscape of your soul. BlackberryNovel.com. The president says, now most of us agree that a plan to reduce the deficit must be part of our agenda. But let's be clear. Deficit reduction alone is not an economic plan. Help me understand why the government should have an economic plan. Is the economy the government's business? Of course not. There's basically 4 areas of life in America. There's church life, nonprofit life, that whole area of volunteering in church and spirituality, community involvement. There is the family. There is the government, and there is the economy. Those 4 things. They need to be kept somewhat separate. They involve each other, of course, but when one starts to run another, we have a real problem. And when the government runs the economy, it's a disaster. Central planning is never wise. There is no way 300 people getting together in an office building are going to do a better job of planning for the United States than regular people left to themselves. Think about the stock market. The reason a stock market works is there is no central planning. In fact, it's the whole idea of a stock market that there's no central planning. People come together on the floor and they ruthlessly go through all the data, and have been doing it for generations now, and find those places that are the best places to invest. In other words, the most productive sectors of the economy. And they throw money into those places, and they take money out of places that aren't productive, and they do it on a minute-by-minute basis with ticker tapes. Well, they don't use ticker tapes anymore, but you get the idea. A stock market is a perfect example of how a free market works. It's a way of redistributing money according to productivity, and it rewards people who add value. The government's exactly the opposite. It's people sitting together and thinking, whom should we reward? People who do things we like. And it just gets so complicated. Your tax form is one big incentive where they try to make you do certain things. You get a tax break if you have an electric car, whatever. Why should the government have an economic plan in the first place? Planning is the problem, especially central planning. I mean, think about it. With your church, with your school system, with your company, when corporate, wherever that is, we all talk about corporate, the headquarters. When corporate plans everything, do things go well? No, they don't. Everybody who's ever worked in the field knows that you just humor corporate and keep them a long ways away. As Tevier said in Fiddler on the Roof, may God bless the Tsar and keep him far from us. Lastly here, a growing economy that creates good middle-class jobs that must be the North Star that guides our efforts. We need to look at that economy that creates middle-class jobs. Every day we should ask ourselves 3 questions as a nation. Number 1, how do we attract more jobs to our shores? Number 2, how do we equip our people with the skills needed to do those jobs? Number 3, and how do we make sure that hard work leads to a decent living? 1, 2, and 3. Well, President Obama's answer to number 1, how do we attract more jobs to our shores? Well, that's through government spending. And he goes on for pages talking about that. My answer is lower regulation and get the government out of business's business. And let business be business. I think we need a wall of separation between market and state. Because when that wall is breached, you get what we call cronyism. I think there should be a wall between church and state, a wall between the state and the economy, and a wall between the state and the family. Well, the state is trying to take over the family. You can see that on the Julia slideshow, where the government has taken over the place of the man in the family. It's actually pretty chilling. And when the government takes over the economy, we have recession. And when the government starts to impede on the area of the church, we have all kinds of problems too, because they start to impose themselves on the area of deepest conviction of people. So how do we attract more jobs to our shores, lower regulation, and get out of businesses? Privatize. Number 2, how do we equip our people with the skills needed to do those jobs? President Obama would say, spend more money on education. Do more central planning for education. Race to the top, more central planning. And have lots and lots of bureaucrats making sure that teachers are really doing what they're doing. So you take an inefficient system, which is the public education system, the most inefficient system that the United States has yet produced, and put more money and planning into it, and that will make it better. Well, it might make it a little bit better, but the truth is there is a shortcut to excellence. It's called competition. There is no competition in our school system. We have a coercive monopoly. I have to pay property tax. If I don't pay it, I lose my house. Most of it goes to education, and it goes to education that I don't approve of. That's called stealing. In any case, it goes to an education system which promotes a secular worldview, which most Americans don't hold, by the way. And the quality level is unbelievably low. And I am not knocking teachers. Teachers do the best job they can within a system. But if you got government out of education, and there's nothing in the Constitution that even hints at government being involved in education, if you got government out of education, all kinds of educational things would spring up. When I walk into a school, I feel like a public school, I feel like I'm walking into the 1930s. The idea that the technology hasn't even happened. Competition helps everything, and it's the only way to improve our schools. So I think we need vouchers to start with, and eventually a totally privatized system where there's no government involvement at all. There's ways to do this. There really are. You wouldn't want one grocery company in the United States, and if the food quality wasn't good, just have more central planning. I've seen that in Eastern Europe before the wall came down, back in Stalinist communism, and it's not pretty, and you wouldn't want to eat there. That's what we have for education. You say, well, people can use private schools. Well, no, they can't. They can, but they still have to pay for the public schools. So there's a $10,000 per student head start that the public schools get. There's no way the private schools can catch up with that. So they're playing at a handicap to start with. There is no real competition. If there were real competition, education would improve itself every few years because people would do the best they could to produce the best education, and innovation would happen. Think of cell phones. Did cell phones improve because of government planning? No. If the government was in charge of phones, we'd still have dial-up. Think about it. We have rotary dials. We still would. And they'd be improving them over and over and over and making them more expensive. We need to let education be a thing of the community, a thing of the market. It needs to be separated from government. And the last one, how can we make sure that hard work leads to a decent living? President Obama's answer is to regulate it and just to say, hey, here's the minimum wage. This is what it'll be. Well, hey, if $9 an hour gets the person out of poverty, why not $100 an hour and we'll all be rich? Do you see the absurdity of setting something like wages? Wages have to be free. If wages are not free, then the market doesn't work and people can't be hired. And the truth is, in a total free market, there is rarely, if ever, any unemployment. Any. Just look before 1913 in American literature and look for the word unemployment. Good luck. Good luck. because we started controlling people in 1913 through big government. Before that, we had tiny government. And there was never enough labor to go around. In other words, labor becomes scarce because in a free market, everybody wants to get something done. That's how you make money. You need people to help you do that. There's never enough people to help you do that. Labor becomes scarce. Guess what happens to wages? They go sky high. If you were to free the market, wages would increase. In a totally free market, labor is the most valuable thing and the scarcest thing. That's it for today. We're going to be continuing through the rather incredible State of the Union address. And we're going to start next time with, does government create jobs? I don't think so. I think government actually steals jobs. Well, that's all for today on Life and Liberty Radio. Thanks so much for sharing this part of your spiritual journey with me. Now, the views on this program are not necessarily those of my advertisers, sponsors, places I work or do business with. They're purely my own, but I'm sharing them with you, so share your ideas with me. Write me on Twitter at Liberty House, LIBERTYHOUS, no E. Until next time, let's continue dreaming and working for a free and spiritually grounded society.